What a pleasure to be here with this group of folks. We've been getting together for 10 years now and having this conversation twice a year to try to make a contribution to the relationship. So we're at a really important moment now, stock-taking moment. And this panel, we're talking about this deal and how we should kind of score it. You know, how is it? We can, though, I think, safely say this, that this is not a big deal. It's not a very comprehensive deal. It can't be, and I'll comment on that. It is a placeholder, though, and as a placeholder, it can be very useful and very important to us right now if we use it as a starting point to do more comprehensively constructive things in the relationship. So let me flush that each of those points out for just a second. It is not a big deal and can't be a big deal because you can't make a big new deal framework at a time when China has not presently decided what it wants to be. And we are in a special moment past a time in which China had a pretty clear policy package, set of goals, about how it wanted to converge with the market economies, what elements of statism it wanted to preserve and where it wanted to be more market-oriented. We're now in a time where China is revisiting a lot of those basic assumptions. Not just China, others in the world too are thinking anew about old questions of the balance between the role of markets and the role of industrial policy and things like that. So it's not just a China phenomenon, but it's foremost a China phenomenon. And they're not really in a position in Beijing right at this moment to sign on the dotted line on all the different elements which have become unstable in our bilateral relationship, but not just between China and the US, China and all the OECD economies. Some of the European players are even thinking even more disruptively in some ways than the United States is, believe it or not. So this can't be a big comprehensive deal because the time is not right for it to be so in Beijing, principally, I'll argue. It's a placeholder. Very little of what is in it is new and couldn't have been done in a much less disruptive way using business as usual approaches to policymaking from 3, 5, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago for that matter, the WTO framework as it exists. Donald Trump hasn't really landed a better package of outcomes than could have been done in a much less bellicose, less disruptive way, I would say. We're going to have big reversion back to growth in some U.S. commodity exports, hards and softs, things like coal and things like soybeans and pork. All will go up. They should have been going up persistently over the past 3 years, and now we'll be catching up a little bit. As a placeholder, this won't be bad. There will be some important elements in it. Things like financial sector opening, potentially very important to Citi, are great, but they're being offered by China to firms globally, not just to the Americans. In fact, European and some Japanese players have been able to move faster than U.S. financials are able to move presently because they haven't had home governments that were taking such a disruptive tack on how to deal with all this. So this kind of small ball outcome can nonetheless be a terrifically important opportunity to build momentum toward getting back on track with a more convergent way of dealing with our economic interests together. And all those global affairs that are more than just economic, political, climate change, pandemic disease, all sorts of things that we need to be working together to manage together. This does give us the opportunity to say, okay, the politics can accommodate deal making and being constructive and not just focusing on the zero-sum kind of nature of things. But it's not going to just be counting up changes in the trade balance. In fact, if we're going to talk about the macro more, I think, a little bit on the second panel too, but China's going through a pretty tough adjustment process right now. If it has a weak growth year in 2020, which I think it might, and we continue to hold up pretty strong on the back of very accommodative monetary, as was pointed out as well, then those fundamentals don't augur terrifically for a big surge in U.S. exports to China, quite the opposite, right? So we may or may not be able to score this as a tremendous success just based on the trade flows. But if we have confidence building measures now, that Beijing takes the signing ceremony moment as an opportunity to show that trying to build leverage by taking foreign nationals into extra legal detention is not the way to build confidence in your market. For example, that pushing journalists further away from the story is not the way to build a dynamic economic crowding in effect that gets everybody excited. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit available to Beijing now that we have a pause in the bellicosity that allows both sides to show that they haven't forgotten what the really terrific opportunities are to be productive and constructive and adult, I dare say, about how we manage this relationship. I look forward to the discussion around some of this stuff, John.